most of us are living interesting lives and telling them and sharing them in a uninteresting way. It's more about how you're framing it. And that's good because that is an easy fix and that's something that you can improve on. Good morning, and welcome back to the Sage Sorority. I'm your host, Shantel. How are we all doing, guys? Happy Thursday. It is a beautiful day in London today, and forgive me right off the top if I sound a little nasally. Guys, my seasonal allergies, hay fever, as they call it here, has been going absolutely bonkers. I don't understand how I'm already suffering from pollen when it's February. It just seems a little premature, but hey ho, that's where we're at right now. So please forgive the stuffiness. I hope everyone is doing well. I can't remember if I mentioned it last week, but our very first Sage Sorority event, the Sage Sorority Presents The Gathering on March 5th, is officially sold out. I'm keeping it cute and intimate and small and curated for this first one. I will absolutely plan another event sometime in the next maybe 3 to 4 months. I just want to get this one done and dusted, see what worked, see what didn't, and then plan for something else. And ideally, that will be a little bit larger so more people can come. But I'm really looking forward to it. If you have your tickets, I am looking forward to hanging out IRL and offline. Be sure to keep up with the show and follow us on socials to stay abreast of new dates and new events that are coming up. I think that's like all the housekeeping that I wanted to mention. As you can tell by the title of today's episode, this is a well overdue part 2 to my episode that I did in September called How to Be More Interesting. This is How to Be More Interesting part 2. We're going to talk about things that I alluded to in the first episode, which was storytelling, niche interests, and magnetism, which is a very spicy, sexy, sensual word that I think we could all embody a little bit more of. So I know that I mentioned I would have given you guys a part 2, and it should have came a lot earlier. But in my defense, I really wanted to be thoughtful about the episode and I didn't want to just slap something together. How to Be More Interesting is one of our most popular episodes. I think it's in the top 4 of all time of this podcast. So obviously you guys really like it. So this part 2 is well overdue. I got a few DMs about that episode and people sharing it with their friends. And obviously it was a really nice reminder of why I have the pod and why I pick the topics that I do. And this follow-up is absolutely worth the wait. So firstly, if you haven't listened to episode 32, I encourage you to go back. It'll be linked in the show notes. Consider this your extended cut. I'm going to do a very brief recap right now because I want this episode to also stand completely on its own. Whether you listened to part 1 5 months ago or 5 minutes ago, I want us all to be on the same page. So quick little recap. This is what we covered. The whole premise of that was being interesting has nothing to do with being loud or well-traveled or having the perfect Instagram grid and all of these very superficial, low-level things that we think being an interesting person must entail in 2026. It's about having a rich interior life, a mind that notices things, makes connection, picks up on patterns, has texture. You guys know that's one of my favorite words to describe us as TSS listeners and a good clue to living a very full life. We talked about feeding your mind on purpose, so deliberately stepping outside of your algorithmic bubble, reading different genres, actually retaining what you consume rather than just passively scrolling past it. I was with a few friends yesterday and I said, we consume so much information, but we're not retaining most of it. Can you tell me the last 10 TikToks that you watch? And it's like, no. You could probably give me 2, maybe one that's a little bit more serious and maybe one that's a little bit more funny, and that's probably it. So it's really important that, yes, we seek out to consume different things, but retention is really the name of the game. We also talked about mini micro adventures. So the idea that you do not have to quit your job and backpack through Asia to have an interesting life and a life worth talking about. You need to throw small, intentional loops, intentionally fuck up your usual routine. That's taking a different route home, eating something different on a restaurant, trying a new restaurant that maybe you've walked past 100 times. Do one thing this week that isn't on your usual script and routine. We also talked about your identity outside of roles. Who are you when you strip away the job title, the relationship, the mom role, the daughter role, the cousin role, the auntie role? Because people who know themselves are interesting, full stop. You can't be interesting if you don't know who you are. You are your best project. Trust me on that. And we also talked about asking better questions. You got to ask better questions. In being a good listener, you got to ask good questions because interesting people do not just wait to be interesting. They also make other people feel interesting because what? Interesting people are interested. Say it with me 10 times fast. And the fastest way to do that is to ask something that actually invites a real fucking answer, not a yes or no, not a I'm good, you, not how was your weekend, something that actually makes someone think. So that was part one, really building your interior world. And today in part two is how do you express that? How do you take everything you've built internally and let it land in a room, in a conversation, on a date, in a work meeting, with a new friend, with an old friend, at a networking event, all of it. So let's get into today's episode. So, firstly, I want to talk about storytelling and what that means. And I want to start with the fact that I don't think a lot of women realize our lack of storytelling ability is holding us back. Most of us live interesting lives, believe it or not. We really do. But we talk about our lives and we tell that story in a very boring, low key, uninteresting way. I'm going to say that again. Most of us are living interesting lives and telling them and sharing them in a uninteresting way. It's more about how you're framing it. And that's good because that is an easy fix and that's something that you can improve on. So there's an author called Matthew Dix. He wrote a book called Storyworthy. And basically he is what they call he is a 50-time Moth Story Slam champion. So if you have no idea what that is, I will explain. If you don't know what Moth is, it's a live storytelling competition where people legit get on stage with no notes and they have to tell a true personal story. And this guy has won it over 50 fucking times. And this is a true personal story that you have to tell. You can't make it up. This guy obviously knows how to tell a story. It's very clear. His whole philosophy comes down to basically one idea and one ethos, which is the best stories are not about the biggest, most dramatic events of your life. They're actually about the moments that something changed even slightly. He calls it like a 5-second moment. It's the beat where something shifts in you. So a type of realization, a thought, a tiny decision, that is where the story actually lives. And I want to say that you can have that 5-second moment within a very dramatic life event, but it doesn't have to be tethered to that either. And I really like this. First of all, I'm going to listen to anyone who has won anything over 50 times. That's just number one. But of course, I'm going to listen to someone who can articulate and tell their life in such a dynamic and compelling way that when they go into a competition, they win it over 50 times. Of course, I'm going to listen to that person. But I love it because it removes the excuse that your life has to be interesting enough, as if there is some level that, okay, if you have a life that's at this level, it's interesting enough to tell people and to narrate. But if you don't hit that level, then it's a wash. And obviously, that's just not true. You don't need to have climbed Everest or survived something terrible to have an interesting story to tell. You just need to find the pivot inside what likely was a very normal moment. That's it. And we all have it. We all have those moments. There's no way that you can be 25 or 35 or 55 and you don't have at least 10 of those moments in your life. Trust me, especially as women in this modern day, I would bet on it. So I'm going to give you guys two versions of a story, and you're obviously going to look at the differences. So version one, which is where most of us default, is I went to a concert recently. It was really fun. I had a good time. Cool. That sounds like something I'm sure you've said a million times. I definitely have. Version two, I went to a concert last year by myself, which is something I'd never done before, and I ended up having one of the best nights of my life. I remember standing there thinking, why did I wait so long to do something like this by myself? What sounds more captivating? What sounds more interesting? What sounds more attractive? What sounds more inspiring? What sounds more confident? I think the answer is pretty fucking clear. That is the exact same event, but you are packaging it and you are telling it in a completely different way. What changed between version one and version two? Being specific, an emotional tether, the different stakes, your point of view. But that's it. It's the same event. You're not making it up, but how are you describing it? How are you giving texture to it? How are you taking that stencil of a drawing and filling it in, coloring it in? Does that make sense? So there is, believe it or not, an anatomy to a good story. And I don't really think we're taught this enough. If you've ever worked in sales, you probably have a little bit of this knowledge. Like I definitely have a little bit of it, but not as much as I wish I did, and not as much as I think women need everywhere. I think some men are better at it. I wouldn't say men in general are better at it. I think some men are. But if you are in any type of biz dev or sales or client facing, public facing, you probably have an ounce of this, and let's build on that. And if you don't have those kind of roles, storytelling is even more important for you because this is a very clear differentiator from those around you. Firstly, and this is a very important one, know what your story is about before you start telling it. We need to think about what we say before we say it, which is a very old adage that I'm sure your parents told you when you were young, but reads true for the rest of your life. You can call it basically the so what test. It's borrowed from journalism. So before you open your mouth and ask yourself, what is this story actually about? Not what happened, but what does it mean? What did you learn? What changed? If you can't answer that, then you're not quite ready to tell it yet, and you need to give it another go around. Secondly, specificity is everything. That doesn't mean you have to be long-winded, and that doesn't mean you need to add in extras that are not relevant, but it does mean whatever you say is intentional and specific. The details are not the boring part, guys. The details are the story. They are the texture. It is the color to your black and white. For those of you that are familiar with Brené Brown, although she has had a little bit of, conflicting feedback over the last few years, I do think that her work and her research is very profound, and she is truly one of a kind. Her TED Talk on vulnerability is one of the most watched TED Talks in the entire world. I think it hovers around 60 million views on YouTube at this point. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend you do. It's a great TED Talk. Her whole argument is that what makes stories land is specificity and imperfection. She has a book which is literally called The Gifts of Imperfection. It talks about vulnerability. Again, not a long book, but jam-packed with info. It's something I actually need to go back and read. Highly recommend Brené Brown's work. Highly recommend you looking into her work if you're into any ounce of personal development and personal growth and self-concept. And I'm sure you are if you listen to the pod. Anyways, back to what we're saying. She is saying that what makes stories interesting is specificity and imperfection. People do not connect with polished highlight reels of events. They connect with honest, specific, and slightly messy versions of said events. I will be honest, there's obviously some nuance there when we talk about social media. I think the idea that people want real and people want authenticity is not the whole conversation. I think there's that, but people also want glam, and they want polished, and they want entertainment, and they want daydreams. So, take that with a grain of salt. But specifically in storytelling, when we're talking about 1-to-1, when we're talking about 1-to-5, when we're talking about 1-to-500, details and imperfection and slightly messy versions of our stories are absolutely 1000% what people want to hear, even if they can't quite articulate that for themselves. And the thing about specificity that I think is very underrated is that it's how you show someone who you are without telling it. You are articulating it without detailing it, if that makes sense. The details that you choose to include, the things that you notice, the parts that stick with you, it outlines your internal thoughts in a very good, fashionable, dare I say, aesthetic type of way. That's your character on display. That's your inner world on display in a healthy yet slightly vulnerable fashion. You're not just telling a story. You're showing someone a piece of your interior world. And then finally, there is a real difference between recounting something and telling it. Recounting is basically, like I said earlier, I went to this dinner, it was nice, the food was good. Boom. Telling it is, I was sat next to someone I'd never met, and within 10 minutes, she said something that completely changed how I think about X. Same evening, one of those is a story, one is a receipt, right? I'm going to say that again. One is a story, one is a recount, one is a receipt. And I'll give you my own personal example. The other night, I went to a pub quiz night. I ended up in last place. It was fun. Got home late. Cool. No issues. Version 2. I decided to go to pub quiz night last minute. I went to one for the very first time a couple months ago, even though I've lived in London for about 7 years, and I loved the experience. Decided to go again. My friend ended up going to the wrong location. We had a laugh about it. She joined me right before we started. We ended up in last place, but somehow we still managed to laugh our butts off and we won a bottle of wine. Which one is more interesting? It's the same event. I'm just giving details that one, show my interior world, that I'm now into pub quizzes. I've lived here a long time. I'm integrating into a part of British culture that I never have before, and I'm enjoying it. You can have a fuck up in a nice night and still end the night on a high. You can end last place and somehow still come out on top. You see what I mean? I'm adding texture to an otherwise very bland event, but I'm choosing to share it in a way that showcases how I really feel about it, as opposed to just recounting the facts of the evening, if that makes sense. So, what I want you to practice this week is very simple. Pick anything that happened. It could be as mundane as you doing dishes, or it could be as simple as you pumping gas, or something a lot more elaborate. Anything. But before you tell someone about it, and I mean anyone, like even before someone asks you, like, how was your weekend? How was your day? How was the meeting? Take a few beats and ask yourself 3 questions. 1, what's the so what, right? What's the point? 2, what is one specific detail that captures how you felt, the mood, the texture, whatever? And 3, what changed because of it, even ever so slightly, right? You don't need all 3 every time, but even one will change your storytelling abilities and make you critically think what you're saying and will make the story sound infinitely better. So, this section is something I want to get right because I truly believe this is what makes me a more interesting person, and this is what makes me a more interested person. And it's truly about curiosity as a superpower, and in conjunction with that, your pocket of depth. So, there's this idea that floats around that interesting people are interesting because they know a lot of things or they're specialists. They have one niche, one lane, a very specific thing that they know everything about. And I do think that there's something to that. We'll get to it, but I want to start somewhere that is a lot more honest and a lot more applicable and real for the average woman like us. Because truthfully, some of the most magnetic people I know are really the opposite of that. I think that they know a little bit about a lot of things. A true Renaissance woman or man. They read widely, they've lived broadly. They can go from talking about something like macroeconomics to perfume history to Italian wine to what's happening in East African literature without missing a beat. I find that to be genuinely interesting. That kind of breadth of knowledge, when it comes from genuine curiosity and not just like surface scrolling or doing it because you think it makes you look a certain way, is its own form of depth and interest. So I'm not going to tell you to pick a specific lane and stay in it. A lot of people will say, you should know about this and you should know about that. And general affairs and general knowledge is important, but you can't know everything about everything. And I think the easiest way to be interesting and to be interested is to stick to things that you actually care about and double down on that rather than things you think are ideal. There's nothing like speaking to someone that's genuinely passionate about something versus something that's forced. The light that comes through in your eyes and your charm and your excitement is palpable, and that is not something you can fake. The difference between knowing things and being genuinely curious about them is one of those things is being magnetic and the other one is not. So think about if you're at an event or you're at a dinner and there's 2 people. Both of them know about wine. One of them can list grape varieties in a Brunello di Montalcino and recite the vintage years. Impressive, of course. But there's another person at that table who knows about Brunello too. And when it comes up, all she does is really talk about the first time she had it, how it made her feel, why she went down a 3-week rabbit hole about Sangiovese after that, what led her to discover about the soil in Tuscany and how that changed how she thinks about terrain in general. Same topic, but a completely different energy. Someone has a spark to it versus someone is just reciting things, like I said earlier, just recounting things. Completely different energy and vibe, and that's going to change how you receive it as well. Interesting people are also interested. The second person isn't just knowledgeable, she's genuinely curious. She followed a thread, her own little red thread in what she was interested in, and you as the receiver of that story can feel the difference. And that is what I want you to think about. It's not about what is my niche, but where is your genuine, underperformed, I would go down this rabbit hole even if no one was watching and gave a shit curiosity. Because that curiosity is going to come out in conversation. It's one of the most attractive things about a person, especially a woman. It's charming, it's contagious, it makes you feel sparkly, and it makes other people want to be curious too. And the thing about that pocket of depth, whatever that is for you probably already have it and you're just downplaying it because it doesn't feel impressive enough. It feels maybe too personal, maybe too niche, a little too random to bring into the conversation. Maybe it's something like Etruscan jewelry. Maybe it's the history of a specific fragrance house. Maybe it's the architecture of a specific era. Maybe it's the history of house music or the economics of something completely weird and unexpected. And I'm not kidding when I say that I know women who know an extraordinary amount about things that would never come up at a standard dinner party. And those women are always the ones I want to be sat next to. Because when it eventually does come up, and I encourage you to create that space, even if it's not already there for you, the room changes. People lean in, people are interested, they ask questions, and they want more of you. And that is not a performance. Like, that is not something you can fake. And it only really works if it's just that, real. The goal is not you should care about this, but it's the curiosity that makes it contagious. So the question isn't what should I be interested in? The question is what already lights you up that maybe you could dive deeper into, something that you've been a little quiet about. That's what you need to own. Go deeper into it. Talk about it like it matters because it does. And I promise you that that energy will transfer. Now, and I want you to address this specifically for you, if you're listening and you genuinely feel like you're not sure what that thing is for you, you're like, Shantel, I hear you, but I can't even think of one thing. How is that possible? And now I feel like crap. I got you, and it is okay. Zora Neale Hurston wrote in Their Eyes Were Watching God, an amazing book that I have yet to read, but I've only heard amazing things. And this is a direct quote. It's so good. There are years that ask questions and years that answer. Some years you're figuring out what you're drawn to, what you care about, what lights you up. And that's not a failure state. That's just where you are. The answer to what makes you genuinely curious is in there. Just spend a little time looking inward. Sometimes you just need a little space for things to surface. So keep paying attention to what you keep coming back to. That is usually the thing, or at the very least, that is usually the first step into finding the thing. I hope that makes sense and I hope that helps. Okay, now this is the part I've been most excited about because this is where everything truly comes together. So part 1 was about building your interior world. Today we've talked about telling your stories and developing depth in something specific. And now we are going to talk about how you actually show up physically and energetically in a room. And for those that will be attending the gathering very soon, this one's for you. Firstly, I want to say to establish, and I said a part of this in How to Be Interesting part 1, but I'm going to say it again because I really do believe it. Charm is not a personality type, okay? So take that out of your head. It is a set of practices. Introverts can be the most magnetic people in a room. Quiet does not equal boring. Quiet does not equal anxious. There is such a thing as confident, settled, soft power, quiet. And it truly does speak volumes before you've even opened your mouth. There's a researcher called Vanessa Van Edwards. I hope I'm getting that right. And she wrote a book called Captivate. And then she also gave a TED Talk on the science of people. And the research that she found over and over and over again is that the most compelling people in a room are not the ones performing their interestingness. Okay, that was a lot. They are the ones who make other people feel interesting. Genuinely, actually, completely curious about whoever is in front of them. This directly ties into the fact that keeping our focus can be very difficult. The dopamine, the social media, the constant scroll, I get it, I'm in the trenches with you. This is why it's really important that when you are having a conversation, put your phone on silent, flip it down, put it in your pocket, put it in your bag. It really, really helps. And when you feel that compulsion to reach for it, stop yourself. Anyways, I digress. This is full circle back to the point of asking better questions. It's not just the question, it's what you do with the answer, whether you actually listened to it, whether you actually heard it. Did you retain it? Can you build on it? whether you make the person feel like what they said actually mattered or it went in one ear and came out the other. Maya Angelou is truly the standard here. She was famously described as making every single person she spoke to feel like they were the most important person in the room. Oprah talks about this quite a bit. And it's not because like she dominated or anything like that. And if you've ever seen clips of the late Maya Angelou, you know exactly that wasn't really her style. There was nothing brash or over the top about any of her deliverance. It's because she was completely, fully, unhurriedly present. Every time she speaks, it is so intentional and clear. It's like there's nothing else going on in her mind other than what is in front of her. And that is the whole thing. And it's so crazy that now we look at that as a rarity when that really should be the standard. And I honestly think, like I alluded to before, in 2026, our full presence is so unusual. Like people are in the room physically, but mentally they are completely elsewhere. I get it. We all do it. You're in a conversation and your brain is already composing your response before the other person has even finished their sentence. You're half watching on your phone. You're listening to the surface while waiting for your turn. Full, unhurried, like I said, phone down, actually taking you in attention now is a little unusual. And unusual often reads as compelling. I'm telling you guys, it's a competitive edge. And it's not just a virtue. It's a real advantage. Another TED Talk that I would recommend, I know there's a lot of recommendations in this episode, but I really think it's helpful. And everyone retains things differently, right? Like you might listen to this pod in one ear, out the other. Maybe a book is for you. Maybe a TED Talk is for you. So I want to give you guys all the options. It's by Julian Treasure and it's called How to Speak So People Want to Listen. And one of the most useful points he makes is about pace and silence, the deliberate pause, the woman who is comfortable letting silence sit for a moment, not rushing to fill it, not flustered by it, is always read as more confident than the woman who just can't let there be a gap. The pause is not awkward, guys. Trust me. The discomfort with the pause is what makes it awkward. And if you've ever worked in biz dev or sales, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We are taught that when you present the numbers or you show the deal, you say nothing. You let the client, potential client, lead, whatever, you let them speak. And you sit there as long as you have to, even though it feels awkward. You let them speak and you go from there. I feel like I learned that just yesterday, even though that was many years ago. But it's right. You have to slow down. You don't have to arrive at your point immediately. The journey to the point is part of the magnetism. There is no rush. People will lean in more if you don't give them everything at once. Give me a tease, give me a sparkle, you know, a little bit of edging, something. And it all ties into magnetism and sensuality and charm and all of this stuff. And if you're rolling your eyes with me, trust me, it's there for you if you want it at any time, at any moment, at any age. And also there's a quote that's often attributed to Coco Chanel, but I love the sentiment regardless. And it's the most courageous act is still to think for yourself aloud. And whether she said it or not, it's true, because having a genuine point of view and willing to hold it, stand on it, 10 toes down, calmly, without aggression, without needing anyone in that room to agree with you, is one of the most powerful magnetic things a woman can do in a space full of people or full of one who are busy agreeing with each other. Having an actual opinion for yourself and owning it, saying it like you mean it, and then being comfortable if someone doesn't, that is real magnetic presence, truly. And then finally, I just want to touch on very quickly what I would say interesting women don't do. And I'm talking about this because I truly think it's just as useful as anything else we've covered, because sometimes for a lot of people, knowing what not to do is more helpful and more clarifying than any of the things that you should do. So this is, in my opinion, what I've noticed interesting women don't really do. And I would say is they don't over-explain themselves. I would say full stop, over-explaining yourself reeks of insecurity. Make your point, let it land, and let it just hang there. You don't need to double down on things because if you've already explained yourself the first time or clearly enough, it's not something you need to keep ruminating over. If you have an opinion or a decision, you don't need to spend 3 paragraphs justifying it before you've even really said what it is. The justification before the statement is a real confidence tell, I'm telling you. You know what you think, say it, end of. Number 2, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves in life, guys, okay? In life. Interesting women do not one up. Oh my gosh. The one upness, it sends me into oblivion. We've either been this person or been around this person, and it's brutal. Someone shares something, and instead of responding to it, there's an immediate pivot to something bigger, better, more impressive version of something. And it's like, ugh. And I will tell you, the person is doing that to assert themselves and sometimes to bridge connection, but it absolutely kills your connection, like immediately. Nobody feels really heard. Nobody feels warm. Vulnerability has been shut down. And the person who did it just looks wildly insecure. Please, please don't do it. Number 3, they don't perform curiosity. We've talked ad nauseum about this, but there's a real difference between being genuinely interested in someone and faking interest in them. And we've all been there while waiting for your turn to speak. People feel that difference. Even if they can't really articulate it, don't do it. Number 4, interesting women do not shrink their opinions to seem agreeable. We talked about this. This one genuinely tends to lean more to women than men, and it's very frustrating. Like softening and hedging everything before you've even said it. Well, I mean, it's just maybe no. Like you're allowed to think things, you're allowed to feel things, you're allowed to articulate them like you mean them, and you're allowed to just put a period on that afterwards. And then finally, they're not available for every conversation at full depth. I think this is very important. And this goes back to my favorite word, which is discernment. Having discernment for your conversations. Not every interaction requires you to go all the way in. That's not the way it works. Knowing when to bring your full self and knowing when to hold back a little bit of a restraint, the discernment in itself is interesting. Mystery is genuinely, especially in our vlog, outfit of the day, spend the day with me, social media, TikTok, Reels, Shorts era, mystery is genuinely underrated. And one of the lines I keep coming back to is that the most interesting woman in the room is usually the one who seems least concerned with being seen as interesting. She's just doing her thing. And that is both the paradox of it and also it's the whole point. Okay, so that was a lot. That was a very juicy and, for lack of a better term, interesting episode. So let's tie it all together so we're all on the same page. Like I said earlier, How to Be More Interesting Part 1, Episode 32, was about building your interior world, curiosity, feeding your mind, micro adventures, reconnecting with your identity, asking better questions. How to Be More Interesting Part 2, today's episode, episode 54, is about expression, telling your stories with intention, developing genuine depth in something specific, showing up with the kind of presence that makes people want to keep speaking to you. And all of this compounds. That's the thing. You don't become magnetic overnight. You become it through accumulation. What do I always say? Chips make chunks. Every story you tell with a little bit more intention, with a little bit more sauce, every rabbit hole you go down, every conversation where you put your phone away and actually listen, every time you say what you think instead of the softened version, it stacks, it stacks, it stacks. I want to close also with something that Matthew Dix says in Storyworthy. He talks about how the goal of storytelling isn't to impress people, it's to make them feel less alone. And I think that is actually the whole thesis of this episode. And if we're being so for real, it's also a major thesis of this podcast. The most interesting version of you isn't the most impressive version. Like Brene Brown talked about in her TED Talk, it's probably a slightly messy version. It's the most honest, most curious, most present version. The one who makes the person across her feel like she's being truly seen. That is it. That is what we're working towards. And when I tell you guys, this kind of stuff pays dividends in every single aspect of your life. Your personal relationships, your intimate relationships, your work relationships, relationships with your children, your confidence, everything. The 10X is across the board. So thank you so much for being patient with this one. For those of you that were patiently waiting for this part 2, I'm happy to finally deliver. I know 5 months is a really long time for a part 2, but I did get a few messages about it and I really do appreciate it. I love getting feedback on specific episodes or the pod in general because it really does help me narrow my focus on how to deliver content that makes sense for the brand and for you guys. So love, love, love. Please, give me your feedback. But I wanted to sit down and do this one properly. You guys really liked it, so here it is. And if this resonated, please share it with someone who maybe needs the help. Maybe she's in her dating era, she started a new job, she's in a new industry, whatever it is. And also, if you haven't listened to episode 32 yet, go back and do that. I'd highly recommend stacking them, listening to 32 and then listening to today's episode again. They work together, but part one really does set the foundation. So I hope that you enjoy today's episode and episode 32. I love you guys all so, so much. Have an amazing Thursday and an amazing weekend. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.